on Zoom video. Also, we're sending a feed out to YouTube, so we'll have everything for the archives. And we're especially happy to have all of these students right here who came across the way this morning, got dressed up really nicely, and came out here in person. So we appreciate you coming out this morning. And there'll be a luncheon following the event. Carmisha, you give me the cue when we're ready to go, and we'll have Francie roll the video, and then we'll be off. Okay, Francie, roll the video.
Faculty, staff, students, and friends of Bennett College, we thank you for joining us in person here at the Global Learning Center and across the country on Zoom video. In just a moment, let's give a round of applause to the stars of our show, the SuperSheroes of Civil Rights.
All right, here we go. Rosalind Smith, if you could come forward and get a round of applause from our students. We have a seat for you right up here. And we also have, coming from all over the country, Nancy Kirby.
Philadelphia.
This is Graham. If you could.
Forestville, Maryland.
And two sisters from opposite ends of the country, Marilyn Mackle and Gwen Mackle-Rice.
Chicago.
Could cue up our PowerPoint real quick. Then I just want to go over our program for today. And we have a few guests. And I just want to start out by doing a quick introduction, thanking you all for coming out here on Zoom and in person. And what I want to do first to start everything out is bring up Deborah Love, who's the Senior Director of Alumni Relations here at Bennett College. If you go down, Francie. And while we're doing this, if we could, you all, if you could take a picture of this when you get a chance, and if not, we'll put this up at the end. This is so that you can give some feedback on this program, and people on Zoom should be able to do the same thing. So let me turn it up now over to Deborah Love.
Good morning, everyone. I am so excited to be among the Sheroes, as well as among you wonderful Bennett Bells. I see an alum here, a few alums here, and we want to thank you for being here today. I'm Deborah Love, as Professor Lipscomb said. I am the Senior Director of Alumni Relations here at Bennett College. And Bennett College students, faculty, and especially President Willoughby Player had such leading and supporting roles during the sit-in movement. Bells were organizers, participants, and some of them even went to jail. And the reason that they did this was so that we could have the lives that we have today. So I'm not going to spend much time saying anything else, but I want you to just sit at the feet of these women as they share their stories, because they really have made an impression on my life personally, because I know each one of them or have met them, but I want you to have the opportunity to hear them and appreciate all that they have done. So on behalf of Bennett College and our alumni, we thank you for being here today.
So if I could now just give a quick, if you would go down, Francie, if I could now, I wanted to give a quick charge to the students here as we do this program today. So students, one of the things I just wanted to ask you to do is to think about as we do this program is make sure that as you do this program or anything at Bennett, we want you to develop your curiosity. And you already have by being here today, getting dressed up, coming across the way instead of doing the program on Zoom. We also appreciate all of you that have come out on Zoom today. So that part you've done a good job with already. Identify the resources so you can learn about the civil rights movement and other things that have gone on in the past. There are people that are still around talking to you, so there's more news to be discovered. And as you execute your own research, make sure that you can restore your audio and video interviews with the people that are still around today, research paper, and photographs. And finally, you'll have an opportunity to showcase your work. We're hoping in the spring to do an interdisciplinary research day where you could showcase your work. There's a Bennett College YouTube channel and a radio show, which Jasha works on. And finally, there's a new thing I want to show you. If you could click that link, Francie, you might have to reshare. It's a new thing our department has developed that all of the students can contribute to. It's called the Bennett Banner Blast. And what this is, pull down just a little bit, Francie, if you could. And the other way. So we can see the top heading. Okay, so you probably can't see it on the top, but this is a site called the Bennett Banner Blast, and it's an opportunity for you all to write articles. And Raymond here wrote an article here on, pull up a little bit so you can see this a little bit more. Jabs at the gym. This is an article about the Vaccination Center over at the gym that Raven worked on. So we'll be sending you information about how you can contribute toward this blog site, which is in the tradition of the old Bennett Banner, and how you can be a part of getting the news out here on campus. Let's right now, if we could, Francie, what I wanted to do is play a little bit of information. There's a video that I wanted to start with Esther Terry, who was a former president of Bennett College. And she talks a little bit about Willa Player, who you might have heard of in some of your classes and in some of your own research. And this is a video that Gwendolyn McElrice shared with me a while back. And you can search it by searching Esther Terry. Is it the Smithsonian? Gwen?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go ahead, Francie, and share that. We have a couple of videos for you today that we will play.
There she is.
Let me first tell you a little bit about Dr. Player. She was a big, 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 big woman. And I don't mean in stature, I mean in physical stature, I mean in the shadow she cast over the campus when she walked it. She was quiet. She was a very, very quiet, very dignified woman. But we all believe, not I, we all believe that she was profoundly committed to making Bennett women, the girls who came to Bennett, into women who could stand in the world, strong women with a commitment to social justice. Now that, I don't mean just to being good English teachers, being good, math teachers, being good physicists. I mean undergirding all of that with a profound sense of social justice. And that was her, and she talked about that, but quietly in her philosophy. She talked about the fact that education was no good if you didn't use it to correct wrongs in society. She just believed that. And so she didn't make fiery speeches about that. She wasn't a fiery speeching person, but she was very quietly committed, and you knew when you were in her presence that it was not just nonsense that she was talking. She really believed and lived what she talked about. So Dr. Player was a really, really brave woman, and if she cared about anybody, she cared about what the legacy that she would pass on to us at Bennett College. She was an incredible woman. So that was Dr. Player. Later,
okay, and now we have another video, Francie, and this is a project. You can keep on playing that one through. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'll look back the video stopped. But we're going to cue that back up. Go ahead, Francie.
When you were in her presence, that it was not just nonsense, that she was talking. She really believed and lived what she talked about. So Dr. Player was a really, really brave woman. And if she cared about anybody, she cared about what the legacy that she would pass on to us at Bennett College. She was an incredible woman. So that was Dr. Player. Later,
Okay, now here's another video.
you must know this story, that when the girls were arrested during the second wave, they were put in jail. She got in her car and drove down. Now, she didn't get a driver to take her downtown. She got in her car alone and drove downtown to go and to say, these are my girls, I brought them their homework. I want to see after them, I want to see what they were doing. So this is a black woman in a car. A lot could have happened to her. A lot of people in Greensboro did not like what was happening, and to see this woman saying, there had been a cross burn. She did have a cross burned at the college president's house. Dr. Blair was a committed and a sincere soldier. She really was.
Yes. I want to if we just take a break for a second, and I want to ask just real quickly the civil rights leaders here that are on this Zoom call. So, Marilyn, this would probably be your era of students that went to jail. And who else on this Zoom call was at Bennett at the time that the jailing was happening?
That's correct. Yes. I remember as if it were yesterday, Dr. Player and just how she was. She was always in that car alone, taking care of us. Even when we walked to town on Saturdays, see her driving around, watching, protecting by herself. But when she came to the jail, I remember it. We were all there. At that point, I think close to half of the student body was in jail. And she came and just stood in her way and talked with us, let us know that things were going to be all right, that they were working on our release. And she just was a calming force. I mean, I never felt fear for those days. I think 4 or 5 days that we were in polio hospital was jail, on the floor of the polio hospital. It was just, we just never felt fear. I think we never felt fear because Dr. Player took care of business, quietly took care of business and took care of us. Tough times. As Dr. Terry said, this was not a joke. On those Saturdays that we went to town, sometimes the Klan was walking down, was it Elm Street? They were walking in their garbs down the street on the sidewalk. I mean, they were just whatever present in Greensboro, but we just refused to be afraid.
Marilyn, Dean Scarlett reported to me that the grades of the students that went into jail were even better than the grades before the students went to jail. How could that be possible?
I didn't know that. I think commitment does everything to you. I mean, there was just commitment. There were hundreds of people who were in the church near Bennett before we marched downtown and followed it was a routine to go to jail. So I don't know. I'm surprised to hear that, quite frankly. I didn't know our grades were better. I can't say mine were. I don't remember, quite frankly. But I think commitment does a lot to you. When you got a focus, you got a purpose, you know what that purpose is, and you're living that purpose, it encompasses everything you do. Everything you do is focused on that purpose, and you do it well, or you don't really do it all, because if you don't have a purpose, hey, we're floating. We're just flying around the world, so to speak, maybe just walking around days. But when you got a purpose, you're focused. And that was very much a purpose on that campus. I mean, the talk, it was like a television, not a television, a telephone going through the dormitories. When it was time to go march, it was, we didn't have phones. In fact, there was just one in the whole dorm, in every dorm. But the word went down the hall that it was time to go. And we went, that we were what we were doing, where we were going. The word just got out, and there we went. So purpose will make you do what you need to do to live your life and to do it well. And that's key, purpose.
And you heard in the video from President Terry that there was a cross burned in the yard of the president's house, which is across the street right now, is from the parking lot there at the corner. Now, Jacia Smalls, who's right here, did her own research on this, and Linda Brown and Rosalind, I believe, are the only two sit-in award winners that live in Greensboro right now.
Yes.
So they, so Jacia did some interviewing with Dr. Linda Brown. We want to play a portion of that video that she did for UNC TV last year, which means probably 2 years ago. Okay. All right, cue it up, Francie.
Many people think the movement began on the first day of February of 1960, but Linda Brown wanted to tell the story of others who helped plan and execute this civil rights victory.
This is Bells of Liberty, which is the book that I wrote and published as I was retiring from the faculty at Bennett College. And I wanted to tell the story of the Bennett women who were so involved in the movement. And I wanted to tell that story because it had really not been told. And I thought, I'm the one who has to tell this story for a couple of reasons. One is I was there. Another was that because I was the president's niece, I knew a lot of the backstory. And the third thing is that I'm a writer. And I thought, all those three things are not going to come together in anybody else, And if this story is going to be written and it's going to be written well, I'm it.
Linda Brown had a very different college experience than most first-year students. She stayed here with her aunt, Dr. Willoughby Player, who was the president of Bennett College during this time. One time in the middle of the night, there was a knock at the door. Linda Brown was at the top of the stairs when her aunt let in a campus security officer. Linda Brown learned a lot that night about the racial relations in Greensboro in 1958.
I heard the door, and I heard the night watchman talking to my aunt, and he said, "Dr. Player, are you all right? Somebody's burned a cross out here." And that was done in reference to one of the faculty members, Dr. Edward Edmonds, who had been trying to integrate the city swimming pool. I knew about racism. I knew about the struggle in the South because my mother was from Mississippi and my father was a civil rights worker. But to have it in the front yard was a little scary.
And right now we're here in front of the David Dallas Jones Student Union, right here on Bennett College campus. In the winter of 1959, Bennett students met here to plan for the sit-in movements. After the sit-in movements began in 1960, Linda Brown was hanging out right here in front of this building. A station wagon pulled up with a group of her friends, and they wanted her to join them downtown at the Wharf lunch counter to sit in. She got in, and they headed that way.
There were several of us in the car, and I got in the car without really thinking about it very much, except that I knew it was something that I needed to do and should be doing. And that's when I said, maybe we should have a prayer before we go down there, because I knew that this was not a joke. That's when Gloria Brown said, "No, we don't need any more prayers. We need to go down there and do something," which I agreed with her, but I thought we needed some prayers also. Anyway, I sent my own prayer up silently, and we headed out to downtown.
Linda Brown was very scared the first day she sat in at the Woolworth lunch counter. When she observed a white waitress carrying knives, she knew she wasn't the only one.
I mean, there was nothing on this tray but knives.
And she walked right by us, and she was as nervous as we were, I think. She was shaking like this, and I could see those knives rattling, which was not very, that was kind of scary also. She didn't look up, you know, she was like looking like that, trying to, I guess, keep her composure. But I remember that, I will never forget that, how scared she was and how scared we were. And we were supposed to be studying, so my book was open, but I wasn't reading anything.
All right, so we want to play one more video. This is a bit of a world premiere of sorts. There's a program called Counter Conversations that's being produced by the International Civil Rights Center and Museum. And in the first episode stars Rosalind Smith. We filmed this quite a while ago, and it'll be available on the website. And we're going to see a highlight of that today. But what I want to first do is call up John Swain, who's the CEO of the International Civil Rights Center and Museum, just to have a few words for you all and about the contributions of Bennett to civil rights in Greensboro and across the world.
Hey, how are you?
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you for this wonderful invitation to have me to come over and talk about this month and the history that we are seeing. I apologize for being a little late. We got a house full this morning, so everybody is wanting to come and learn so much about the activism and about the history and the commitment that we engage with every single day at the International Civil Rights Center and Museum. There is not a time that I walk into the doors or touch any one of the front doors or the side doors that I do not think about people like Rosalind Smith, about Gwendolyn Mackel, her sister Marilyn, whom we're going to be honoring at our gala on July 25th. And as you know, that is the time of the actual integration of the lunch counter. But as I walk into that space each day, I'm constantly reminded that Black history, history in our country, doesn't just start and stop with one act. It's about the whole. It's about what we do together to improve lives for everyone. As I spoke to a group of students this morning, and I reminded them about 1868, when 28 of 37 states ratified the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. That 14th Amendment, these students that walked to that building that had planned to seek equality in our country, they had studied that. They understood the transformative value of what our country had promised them, had promised all persons. So when they integrated that lunch counter, they raised the standards for everybody in our community. It still permeates our society today through everything that we do. So just making those kinds of powerful changes in our country where the lives of everyone is improved is what I call real history making in our country. And so as we bring people into the museum, they walk away, they write powerful comments on TripAdvisor. I would invite each of you to go out and review some. And for us at the museum to capture more of these stories, we're going to be inviting students from Bennett College to work with us on an intern project to go out and help identify yet more of these folks who are our history makers in this country. Students from James B. Dudley who stepped up. I love it when I'm standing in front of a group of 8th graders and I say to them for the first time, it was the college students that started this change in our country, that bled across the globe. The news cameras picked it up, but it was the power of high school students that closed the deal. Yeah, so don't underestimate the voices of our young people in our country to make changes. There is a huge looming issue in our country right now. It's not only the cancer of racism, but it is young children not being able to be kids again, to go to school and study and focus on what's being taught them. They're worried about gun violence in the schools. So it's going to be young people in our country that is going to take on a powerful issue and say, hey, this isn't right either. Let us bring it to an end. So thank you all for the opportunity to come over. I always love being in the presence of our Bennett alumni and paying homage to them for the powerful work that they do. And every day we acknowledge Bennett College and their contributions to the civil rights struggle. So thank you.
We don't bury the lead. Can you just say again one more time about your honoree for the award?
Yes.
Coming up this summer, maybe, and I will tell the students when this gala event comes up, contact me about how you might be involved either in person or virtually.
Yes. This July 25th, we're going to be honoring the Honorable Marilyn Mackle. She is a alumni of Bennett College, went to Georgetown, lives in California. I've talked to her on the phone a couple of times. And we're going to have this event in February before having to change it for the virus. She said, I don't know if I can make it there. And I'm thinking, there's no way we can have a gala without you being on site. So when we moved it to July, I said, let me know whatever it takes. We're going to make sure that you are here with us to celebrate. This event is about lifting up those kinds of people. We honored Ms. Rosalind Smith, but 3 years ago, I believe it was. And it's always a wonderful opportunity to draw Bennett just a bit closer to that museum because we look to you for guidance. We look to you for help as well. Thank you.
When you all on Zoom and in person, pay special attention because these women here are all sit-in award recipients. And there's other people that have yet to be recognized, or even they be discovered, and that can be a part of your research work. So let's play one final video. This is I said it was a bit of a premiere. And this is going to tell you a little bit more about the planning of the sit-in movement, which happened in 1959, which Bennett was the Bennett students were the key drivers of. And it's going to tell you a little bit more about Dr. Clare. So Francie, if we could roll the Counter Conversations movie.
For history to survive, the stories must be told out loud. Our sources impart their firsthand experiences, not just the myths, but the facts. Join us now for Counter Conversations.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Counter Conversations. This is our first such event here at the International Civil Rights Center and Museum, and we are very happy because we have a special guest with us today, Rosalind Smith, Bennett College class of 1961, and I'm here with Dr. Will Harris, the principal scholar at the International Civil Rights Center and Museum. Professor Harris, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, and I'm very glad to be here.
We want to give you a chance in this series to hear from some of the people who made history happen. We have one of those people here today, Rosalind Smith. Rosalind, what does it feel like being inside the lunch counter?
It feels a little strange, and when I first entered the room this afternoon, it seemed a little eerie because I had to kind of like retrace in my memory the layout of the counter, and it seems unusually large today. It did not seem that large back in the days of 1960 when we were demonstrating and sitting at the counters.
Before 1960, did you ever come shopping at the Woolworth building?
I did come and shop, but my shopping was very infrequently because I was a student with limited means because my mother was just a domestic and my older sisters usually sent me the things in the mail that I needed. But of course, I came sometimes, even if I didn't shop, but just to accompany my sisters or to act as a chaperone for freshman and sophomore students.
What was the shopping experience like then for a Bennett College student?
Well, you usually came into the store, you knew that you were not going to be in the store for a very long time. You knew that you had to be focused on what you were going to be shopping for, and you usually headed to the spaces in the store where the items that you wanted were. And you certainly did not want to encounter any negative interactions with white customers who were definitely in the store.
When you came to Greensboro and you started at Bennett College, what impact did that have on your sense that things could be different?
When I got to Bennett, a new world opened up to me. The presence of Dr. Willoughby Player as our president, I think was a highlight of my attending Bennett. She was a reserved woman who exuded confidence, and that was transmitted to us as students. And yet, we had a little fear of her. When she would walk from the president's home to her office in the Race building, if you were on this side of the campus, you would try, because our classrooms were on this side of the campus, if you saw her leaving her home, you would race from this side of the campus to that side so that your paths would not intersect. Now, sometimes it did, and students were surprised when she would call you by your name. Most of us didn't think she knew our names, but for some reason, to this day, we kind of wonder, how did she know our names? With the push, the instruction, the involvement, and the passion of Dr. Edmonds and Dr. Hatchett, we sat down, we talked about what we could do. Could we pull off a demonstration downtown? What would it be like? Were we strong enough as individuals to participate? Would we tell our parents about what we were wanting to do? Would we ask for their approval to participate? What about our friends right at the college? Could I say to my best friend, you know what I'm planning to do? Do you want to come along? What do you think? Those were those kind of questions that we sat down. We decided that this was something that we wanted to do. We decided we would meet Monday through Friday nights discussing how we were going to do this.
So you started in 1957 at Bennett.
Yes.
When did these meetings start?
These meetings started in the fall of 1959, early 60, before the February event.
So 1959,
yes,
before the end of the year. What were you doing in the meetings 1957, 1958, leading up to that time?
Well, those earlier years, we were just holding meetings, doing the things that an organization would normally do. We didn't discuss taking any action at that time, not locally anyway. We knew what was happening across the country.
So it was more about studying and familiarizing yourself with the, the whole picture.
Yes, and we had a dynamic student government president named Gloria Brown.
Do you remember her as being the one that moved you to action?
Oh, yes, yes.
And then the time frame of this was late 1959?
Yes, yes. She came to the meetings focused, and of course, Dr. Edmonds and Dr. Hatcher were always present for the most part.
Did you have a sense of what Dr. Player knew about what was going on?
Well, we did not tell Dr. Player what we were doing initially.
Was that to protect her or to protect you?
Protect us. because we felt that if she knew what we were doing without having discussed it prior to our actions and our discussions, we thought we could be sent home. We knew
And you loved Bennett.
Oh yes.
So that would have been a terrible consequence.
Oh yes. My
And
mother.
your parents.
I don't know what my mother would have done if I had to come home, but I knew I would not ever want to be sent home by the college. And most of us felt that pressure too, because most of our parents were low-income parents. And first thing they would say, and we heard some of our fellow students who discussed it with their parents when they got involved. I didn't. We did not send you to Bennett to go downtown and demonstrate. That would have been left to some other people to do that.
Going back again to 1959, can you take us through some of the actions that you were planning during the meetings between that fall of 1959 and the end of the year?
Well, as I say, we met in the student union every night. And one of the things I want to highlight is part of some of those original 4 fellows were meeting with us. A.C.E.S. Blair, who was from Greensboro, David Richmond, who was from Greensboro, Joseph McNeil was from New York, and McCain was originally from Washington, D.C. But A.C.E.S. and David Richmond were more constant in the meetings with us. Also, A.C.E.S. had encountered some difficulties at Dudley High School because he, as a young man, had already begun to experience that he was not satisfied with the way things were. So those two were constant, and they, well, as young men, probably gave us a little bit more confidence, but as Bennett women, we were always told we could do whatever we decided we wanted to do.
What was the makeup like of those meetings? In terms of the number of people and the where the different schools that were represented?
Well, mainly they were just the Bennett students, and it was limited in numbers. It was not a very large group by no means of no stretch of the imagination.
So what would be the average size?
I would say that maybe there are about 15 of us, because most students decided that they did not want to be a part of the exchange. And I don't remember exactly, I don't think we really reached out to students outside of our sociology and history classes, and those students who were members of the NAACP branch.
How did the A&T guys know to get over there?
I really don't know, except David was probably already a student at A&T. A.C.E.S. was still in high school. Joseph and McCain were students at A&T. And of course, we dated A&T guys. McCain was dating a Bennett student who was also part of the group. I don't think McNeil was dating anybody, but from that interchange, and of course, if we were dating someone from over there, we wanted them to be involved in what we were involved in.
So then take us a little bit more into that planning. What kind of things were you talking about doing?
Well,
and also, what was your role? Were you a sort of a leader in the group, or were you somebody that sat back a little more?
I was the secretary of the group. We discussed, would you be afraid? Would you react? Do you think you were strong enough not to react? Because that was the key. Strong enough not to react to any actions that were negative. Because we didn't want anything to cast a shadow on our demonstrating. And that was one of the reasons why we also involved the A&T students, because we knew that they would be our backup. They were going to look out for us, and we expected that. And when we finally told Dr. Player.
So when did that happen that you told Dr. Player you were planning this?
Well, Gloria Brown, as I said, who was the student government president, at some point we decided we had to tell her. We were approaching the Christmas vacation period. We had said we wanted to demonstrate before the Christmas recess.
What were you specifically planning to do?
We were planning to picket. It was not necessarily to sit down at that particular point, but it was to picket. And later, when we talked, we revealed to Dr. Player what we wanted to do. She said, well, you could picket, but it wouldn't be as meaningful if you only did that. You would need to do something more substantive, and that would be to sit in.
Are you saying that the president of the college was the one who gave you the idea of sitting at the lunch counter?
No, I'm not saying that she was the only one, but her support and input enabled us to come to the decision.
To go a little bit farther than you had originally planned.
Yes. My question to Bennett students today is, what are you going to stand up for? You can choose it because they have technology that we didn't have. I would like to think they've had more exposure than we had. I would just like to see them kind of like pick up the banner, be the example.
Gotcha.
One of the things that we want to try to accomplish here at the International Civil Rights Center and Museum is the combination of knowledge and action, wisdom and activity. And we understand from our study of the time that you were so closely involved that the issues were a great deal more than simply doing something, just acting, but they involved planning, they involved having a vision of what might be achieved and what might be accomplished in the long run if you achieved your immediate goals. They involved a certain amount of serious knowledge that you gained from those two professors that you mentioned most prominently and from your encounters with the president of Bennett College. And that kind of knowledge, that kind of understanding is an essential part of planning and carrying forward a civil rights action. It's not simply a question of going into the street and making noise and carrying signs. And I think wherever we look, whether it is in the Montgomery bus boycott or the Greensboro sit-ins or any number of other possibilities, there was a very, very large degree of awareness and education as preparation for the actions that turned out well. And you represent just that combination of wisdom and activism as you have expressed today. Thank you very much for being such an example to us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to tell my story and the story of my sister Bells at Bennett College about our participation in the sit-in movement at the Woolworth counter. It was truly an extraordinary experience, one that, as I now look back, was unusual. It was definitely a learning experience that has carried over into my adult life, and one that I would like for all people to understand that they have a responsibility to eradicate any inequality that exists wherever. Thank you.
Everybody
So this is the end of our time for our formal A.C.E.S program, but we have a special treat for you today. Our group in person is going to be going to a luncheon at the International Civil Rights Center Museum. So what we're going to have a bonus session. So if you need to go, you can go. But we're going to have on right now Jacia Smalls, one of the hosts of Bel Air Radio, and she's going to do some question and answer. So if you want to stay on and you're in the chat, send your questions into the chat. Francie, if you could kind of monitor those. And then if you're in person and you have a question that's on your mind, raise your hand. We're going to go on for another 15 or 20 minutes or so, and we're going to use this recording for our radio show this week.
All right, good morning. I am Jacia Smalls, a graduating senior journalism major, theater minor from Philadelphia, and I'm one of the hosts of Bel Air Radio. It's definitely a pleasure to have our SuperSheroes here with us to learn more about what actually happened when the time when we weren't here, to actually learn about the history of Bennett College. So just to get started, I definitely want to ask before we get into, what we really want to talk about. I have to ask, what was Bennett College like during your time here? What are some of the best memories you all have here? I'm starting with Ms. Rosen since you're right here.
Okay. Thank you. A lot of memories. First of all, as a freshwoman, I was in the freshman choir. And we practiced Monday through Friday, but we only sang one Sunday in the month. My sophomore year, I was in the orchestra, and I was also in the senior choir. That was truly a very rewarding experience. We sang every Sunday. And the thing about the choir was that when we marched in, we had to know the first stanza of the hymn by memory. We did not look at the hymn book. That was also true of the last stanza as we processed out of the chapel. One of the other things was about chapel is equivalent to your A.C.E.S. We had dynamic speakers, but also one of the things that I loved, at the beginning of the chapel, there was a prelude period in which the organist played music, and there was music played at the end of the chapel sessions. I learned a lot about classical music. Although my mother was a pianist, I did not know classical music. My junior year, I began my major, and this was in classes taught by the Dr. Edmonds, who was also the president of the local branch of the NAACP. Now, this is where I began to really get my exposure about really what was happening in the world, and also to discuss with my other classmates our experience, because we were able to attend NAACP conferences which met throughout the state of North Carolina. I was also, I worked all 4 years as a student secretary for the chairperson of the Humanities Division, for Dr. Jared, who was a very strict person, but during my time with him, he and his wife became my parents away from home, which I loved them. My senior year, I also traveled with a college choir to New York. That was some experience. But more importantly, I was also an exchange student to Mount Holyoke College for 2 weeks. I am from a very small town, Princeton, West Virginia. I had not traveled anywhere. So my first trip out of West Virginia was to Bennett College. The best experience of my college life was meeting my lifelong friend, Dr. Esther Terry, whom you heard earlier. We met the first day on Bennett College's campus at Kent Hall. The dorm is no longer standing, but we have been tight since that day. And we were only free of each other for 1 year, and we do not know how that happened, but we picked it up, and it has existed ever since. Dr. Player was just such an unusual figure. She was very stately. We knew she was president. We were somewhat fearful of her, but we also loved her, most of us, not all of us. When a student was sent home, and you all don't know nothing about a student being expelled from college, but it happened during our time. And she would state in the chapel session that she didn't give the person's name, but that we were losing a student. And of course, you kind of like looked around wondering who it was, but you couldn't look around too much because those kind of behaviors were not permitted at Bennett. When we were students, we said alphabetically within our class. Attendance was measured by the person who sat up in the balcony. Mm-hmm. No one could sit in my seat. Those were they're laughing because they know what I'm talking about. But that was a strange thing. So that kind of made you afraid and put you into check if you were kind of like doing something you had no business. And we know some of us did, some of us left campus, but we could not leave campus we were not supposed to leave campus without being in attendance with one other person. So you had to travel in pairs. So things could happen, and things did happen, I'm sure. I never knew about them. I didn't leave campus too much because they say my mother had no money for me to indulge going downtown unless it was for necessities. So those were the experiences that I experienced.
Those are some real good experiences because, listen, attendance like that, oh, please don't get no ideas. But let's talk about the student movement. Now, we heard about the Greensboro 4, and the Greensboro 4 gets a lot of the, recognition of the student movement, of the start of the student movement. So seeing that come out as a student, what would you say, how did you feel to see that all the media was just acknowledging those 4 men from A&T?
Gwen.
She said, Gwen.
Is this for any of us?
You, Gwen. Okay, well, my father said, ex Gwen. So, Miss Gwendolyn.
How do we feel about acknowledging the gentleman from A&T?
Yeah, what would you say, how did you feel as the media at that time were just acknowledging the 4 men from A&T? What was the thoughts of all the students?
Well, at that time, the media that was out then was not the same media that we're experiencing now. There was no social media. There were just the newspapers and the radios. And of course, we were very focused on what we were doing. But I can't say, I think a lot of that came out later. We were very focused on the demonstration, sitting at the lunch counter. I remember 2 or 3 of the fellows came over to campus and asked us to join them, and we were there the next day. And we sat down at the counter, and as long as we could, and then we came in shifts to be there so that we wouldn't miss our classes. But to be very honest with you, I think we had a very good relationship with the young men from A&T. And I think that continued even when Marilyn came, my sister who came following my graduation, that they continued to have that relationship. But I think over time, the media began to portray it as if it were an A&T a factor. And that I don't think was in our heads at the time. And I think it's because a lot of people were trying to steal the glory. I mean, I've known people who said they participated and they did this and that, and I don't really have any evidence of it. So people, as you know, history is written by those who write it. So depends on how you write it and from your perspective. I think if you talk with any of us who participated, you would get a maybe not a very different story, but not the same story, because each of our experiences were different. As a matter of fact, after we were jailed, but we were booked, but we were not jailed. Right. And of course, we were always worried about whether or not we would go to jail, but still today, I still have a record on my and on my files. But we met with our lawyer consistently. So we were learning a lot about civil rights. We were learning a lot about social justice. And then shortly afterwards, several of us went to try to get into the theaters, to the Carolina Theater. And I remember there were 4 or 5 of us. They let us in. Shirley, I don't know if you were one of us. And I know we went to several theaters and we broke up. Yeah. But they let us in the Carolina Theater and said we were Eskimos. The only thing that I might have looked like with an Eskimo is that I had a camel hair coat with a raccoon collar, and a couple of the other girls had on. But then that evening, A&T and Bennett students went down to test it out, and they were turned away. So there were many iterations of this whole sit-in movement. And what I want to say is, although it was started, it was perpetuated. So many things get started and they don't get perpetuated. And you see Marilyn and her group, the group that followed us. Nancy, you were a year ahead of me. So you missed some of what we experienced, but you were still very much there. I think sustaining a movement is very important. But I do want to say one thing before I get off, because Rosalind told you all about her experiences. But I want to share something in that video with Esther, with our former president, Esther Terry, Esther Alexander Terry. I just want to say that, my classmate, by the way, our classmate. If you get a chance, well, not if you get a chance, please take the time to listen to that entire video. You will learn so much more about Bennett, about its sisterhood, about its traditions, and the relationship between Rosalind and Esther. It's just beautiful, a wonderful story, but it's a history of our country also, because she talks about her father, who was a sharecropper, and how he and his wife were able to educate about 10 children. So I hope that you all will get a chance to look at that. I just want to highlight that, because that is the history from which we have all come. And I'll stop with it. But let me, one highlight while I was there. I went to Mount Holyoke with Nancy and Rosalind, but also I got a chance with my history professor to go hear Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois in one of his last speeches about education. And that last speech, if you get a chance to read it, you'll see it's happening to us now. So get involved in as much as you can, in as many activities as you can, so you can have the experiences that you can that you would never get at any other institution. That HBCUs provide you a wonderful experience. Take advantage of every opportunity you can.
Yes. I want to chime in a bit about the importance of the media. I did not mention to my folks that I was going to be participating in the sit-in, in the demonstration. And first of all, I want to say, I was one of the participants, and I really give honor to those who were truly the leaders, like Gwen and Rosalind, and certainly Gloria Brown, because they really shepherded us and really set an example. And I also want to say that many of the people who were involved at the leadership level were people who were, as I mentioned, sociology majors, history majors. And Dr. Edmonds was really a very important person. He had to leave my senior year. He was not there when we came back because he had been so involved in NAACP activities in Greensboro that he felt it best to leave because he had 4 daughters. And so he moved to New Haven to take a pastor church there. But what he did with his commitment was he came back our senior year. And for those of us who were seniors, he already had worked out plans for us, for the schools that we should think about for graduation, for graduate school. So there was that ongoing commitment. And Dr. Edmonds went on in New Haven to organize the workers at Yale, both the housekeepers and the cafeteria staff. And eventually they did give him an honorary degree, but he continued that kind of legacy. And that was the kind of thing that we could see. My parents saw on the national news that the sit-ins were going on. My mother calls and she says, do not get involved in that. We already have our tickets to come for your graduation. So there was no need to tell her that that had occurred. She did not really find out until I was one of those who was booked, but she didn't find out that I had been arrested until July, when a letter came for me from, I don't know whether it was from the county or whatever. And she thought, in those days, parents did not respect that, they should not know what was going on with their children, even though you were a college graduate. So she opened it up and it stated that we did not have to appear, that I don't know what had happened, but anyway, we didn't have to appear. Well, she was beside herself. She had no idea that I had been involved. And she said, I told you not to do that. And you didn't tell me. And I said, no, because I knew what would happen. And when people would talk to me about, was I afraid when I was arrested? I said, no, I was not afraid of that. I was just afraid of what my mother and grandmother would say when they found out, and it was going to be that I would not be able to graduate. So those were the sorts of things that, I just remembered. And I just want to really give credit to the people who were involved in the NAACP in terms of the kinds of Bennett leadership that they gave and that they paved the way for us.
I like that we're on the track of memories and giving some insightful advice to the Bennett Bells currently. So Ms. Graham, what would you say were some of your best memories and what advice would you give to us Bennett students now?
Well, my best memories was in the very beginning, because I was from a small town in Pennsylvania, and I didn't experience any segregation like I did when I went to Greensboro. I could go to the lunch counters and sit. I could go to the movie theaters and sit. It was no problem. So when I got accepted at Bennett, and my mother put me on a bus and sent me down there. And on my way down there, my first encounter was a little old lady got on a bus and she was standing near the front. So I said to her, excuse me, I said, there's some seats back there. And she looked at me like, are you crazy? And then it hit me, girl, you're in the South. I said, oh, okay. So when we got down to the bus station in Greensboro, I looked up and the signs were supposed to have been down, colored right and green and white, but they were still there. And I'm saying, well, where do you go? And I said, well, you know where you better go because you're down here by yourself. So I went. So that was my first experience of the segregation. And then when the sit-in came in, I wasn't in with the planning of it, but I did participate, and I was one of the ones that were arrested. If you see the picture with the little white skirt and black jacket, that's me. And didn't tell my parents. I was definitely, like Nancy said, oh no, you cannot tell your mother what you just did and get in trouble and be put out of Bennett. Oh, no, now that's trouble. That would have been trouble. But I tell you, it was the best thing could have ever happened. And even with the movie theaters, when we did a lot of picketing, a lot of walking, we were called all kinds of names. But, we kept smiling and we kept going. and it was just a great experience. And Dr. Player was awesome. Whenever you saw Dr. Player, you straightened up, And when Rosalind mentioned about the chapel, we had chapel services on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Yes, we had chapel service on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and for half an hour. And you had seats, like they said, and you better be there because there was somebody in the balcony counting to make sure whether you were there or not. And even on Sunday, and if you missed so many, they would start taking points from your records. So you were there, and you had a lot of respect for Dr. Player. If you were on campus and you decided you're gonna cut across the grass, and Dr. Player saw you, and she would call you by name, you had no business running across that grass. She taught you to be a lady. She taught you those things. So my experiences at Bennett and my classmates, I would give nothing for them. They were awesome. And I'm in touch with a lot of them. It was just a great experience. So I am glad that I was able to participate. And even as of now, we're still in this fight. We're still in it. And I hope the young people realize we haven't arrived yet. We have to be strong.
Man. Yes, amen. Miss Graham, are you in this photo right here? Can you see?
Yes. One with the sunglasses.
That's right. That's Shirley.
That's me. And the other one up there with her head, the one with her head down, that is Ann Brown.
Right. Another classmate.
Yeah, that's another class. That's Ann Brown. Yes.
Wow.
That's that 1961 class.
Marianne Bender is a white young woman who transferred from Ohio Wesleyan. She was an exchange student, but she decided to stay at Bennett and she graduated. She's a minister now, and she comes to campus fairly frequently. And the one in the white shirt she was from Hampton, Virginia. I can't think of her name right now, but I remember her well. But Ann Brown was one of our classmates as well.
That wasn't Sandra, was it?
Yeah, Sandra was her name.
Sandra Downing?
Sandra Downing, that's
right, yeah.
Okay, so I like talking about the theaters and the Carolina theaters. So before it was like actually the sit-in movement, Bennett Bells took, partake in many social justice issues and actually protesting at the Greensboro theater. So were any of y'all part of the Greensboro theater? And if not, could you even talk about what was that like protesting at the theater?
I think I mentioned that we did, a group of us, we went to several theaters, about 3 at each. And I went to the Carolina Theater and was admitted and considered an Eskimo in the newspaper the next day. But attempts were made to integrate the theaters after that, and they failed with Bennett and A&T students. So I don't know what happened after that. I think I graduated that year.
The theaters were eventually opened during our time. We could go to the theaters, and that was probably my senior year. So that was 1965. The theaters just opened up. The restaurants were being, we demonstrated in I think it was S&W restaurant and several of the other restaurants at that time. And when the restaurants opened, the theaters opened as well. I recall going to see Lawrence of Arabia I think that was the film at the theater, scared to death. They kept the lights on in the theater when we walked in. A few of us went in and just sat off to the side once the theaters were integrated. I don't recall that we ever went back to any of those restaurants, quite frankly, but they were open for us to go back. I do recall going to the art theater in Greensboro after that and felt pretty safe there. You guys have really said everything to highlight our experience. I do want to emphasize for the students that those chapel sessions that we went to, we kind of dreaded going to it during my time, but we also learned so much. It was 30 minutes where people from around the world came and talked to us. We learned a lot in that 30-minute session. And yes, you had to be there. Same thing on Sundays, the Vespers at Sunday afternoon. The people from the arts, from the academia, leaders in the African American and the Caucasian community came and spoke with us and basically taught us about what they were doing. And then as a result, we got a tremendous amount of exposure in 30 required minutes. The A.C.E.S is the follow-up event, if you will, to that. The A.C.E.S occurs, I think, because those chapel sessions occurred. So this kind of regular programming on the campus is something that we were involved in all of the time. There's a question in the chat. I don't know if you're going to get to that, but I think it's a great question that one of the students has asked, that what is the responsibility of bells now in regards to social, academic, social and racial justice? And I think Mr. Swain, when he spoke, said something that I think is so critical for young people to think about. One of the things that happens now, that happens too often, is that we kill ourselves. And the amount of gun violence by young people in our community is horrendous. And he said that maybe young people are going to take care of that. He really put a spark there for you to think about. That's a serious thing to take care of. But the question, you have to plan and strategize and do a whole lot to turn that around. But if that were turned around, what's coming up on us now? Like Gwen said, things haven't changed a lot. Don't think they have just because we can go to the dime store. They have not. And it's worse now because we do not have the community.
That's right.
You heard us talk about the kind of isolation that existed.
Right, yes.
Yeah, our parents didn't like what we were doing necessarily, but they were there for us. Dr. Player alone, there for us. So the kind of community that we had when we were growing up, you guys don't really have it now. You don't have what we call this strong, supportive, make you fearless Black community. So the thought of trying to turn around the level of violence that exists in our community today is a strong one. And it's so necessary because we got to deal with white supremacy now and this is worldwide. It's a worldwide right-wing movement. And so we have to deal with that. You have to deal with that, our bells. So it's really something, just putting a thought in your head about today so that we can have the kind and quality of tomorrow that we are talking about from yesterday, that we enjoy so much, that we hold dear to our hearts. We want you to have that too.
We were taught respect.
Yes.
Okay, so Mr. Swain wants to come up.
This program is so powerful, and I'm sitting back here and learning so much. I'm so glad that March is Women's History Month. And I would love to invite each of you to help us continue this discussion of the contributions that women are making and have made in our country. And the issue of representation constantly come up. And since I've taken the role of CEO of the institution in 2016, unfortunately, I wasn't around in 2009 when they were laying out the International Civil Rights Center. I would never have been able to see our way clear to exclude the powerful role of Dr. Willa Player and the students that were here on campus at that time. It is a huge missed opportunity, but one that our employees have taken up, and we've started some discussions with the university or the college to make sure that the women of Bennett are represented. And I think March being Women's History Month, I'm going to dedicate that program to our Amelia Parker, who is responsible for seeing that this museum was opened up to tell the powerful stories. But I would invite each of you to help us to continue this dialogue, because I'm sitting back here learning a lot. I've had to really be on the feet as CEO and CFO of the institution for 13 years now, and this left little room to meet many of you, but I'm seeing powerful opportunities here, and I do intend to engage each of you. So thank you.
I want to, I would like to follow up. Am I speaking? Can you hear me?
Can hear you.
Yes.
Oh, right. Okay. When he was talking about Women's History Month, one of the outstanding memories that I had of being arrested was of seeing this small Black woman with a pocketbook, you know how you'd carry a pocketbook over your arm at that time. She was there because she was posting bond for us. And I think that she was the owner of a funeral home. And I think that that is very important that this woman be celebrated. You know, she could be kind of swept away in history, but that was very, very important. I don't remember her name, but the people in Greensboro will know who she was, or who she was. And I think that that's really important if we're talking about honoring women and sometimes people who are doing things that get swept away.
Thank you. So thank you, our Sheroes of Bennett College, for joining us today for this A.C.E.S program. It means so much to learn from you all and just to know about our history and just continue that legacy moving forward. We hope to make you all proud. So thank you all for joining us today. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys, take care. Enjoy your years there.
Absolutely. Best years of your life.
It was wonderful. I'm telling you, lifelong friends.
Yes, yes.
And I like the fact that at that time there were no sororities, because Dr. Player used to say you were all sisters.
That's
and there's
right.
no need for a sorority.
Yes.
And
That's right.
I still feel that today. I know that lots of people joined afterwards, and because sometimes that was your social life and your entree in the community where you went. But while you were on campus, you were all sisters.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Gwen, good seeing you, babe.
Good to see you too,
everybody.
Yeah.
And Rosalind, it was good to see you.
Yes, Rosalind. I think there's somebody in the audience that we might know whose last name is Mackle. Is that her with her back turned? No? Okay, she didn't turn, so that's not her. We have one in Greensboro too.
Oh, okay.
A cousin.
Oh, okay.
That's the QR code y'all can use. And then for the crew that's going to lunch, we're going to meet right out in the lobby. And then I got a car. Mr. Swain, you can take a couple of people.
We can take 3.
Are you able to take a couple?
Can we take 3?
2? So let's go out to the lobby and we'll figure out transportation.